Justice Kavanaugh?
Just to confirm on the standing issue, under federal law, no doctors can be forced against their consciences to perform or assist in an abortion, correct?
Yes, we think that federal conscience protections provide broad coverage here. Just to be super precise, there are some triggering requirements of receiving federal funding and so forth. We've cited the relevant provisions at page 5 of our reply brief. The church amendments have the most comprehensive protection here, and we think that those amendments guard against the kind of injury that respondents are asserting. There are also state law protections that often apply in this context.
Thank you.
Justice Barrett?
Would that be true even if the declarations were interpreted as respondents do, to say that they regard any participation, even transfusions or D&Cs, after the abortion is otherwise complete because tissue needs to be removed?
Yes, I think that would be true. So the most relevant church amendment provision is 42 U.S.C. 300A-7D, and its language says that a doctor shall not be required to perform or assist in any part of the healthcare program that would violate the doctor's religious or moral beliefs. So it's tied to the nature of the doctor's beliefs rather than particular procedures.
And one other question, and this goes to the merits. As I understand it, the serious adverse consequences that have to be reported or that FDA considers risks are death and transfusion, but not, say, I mean, it seems to me, and I think the data bears this out, that the elimination of the in-person dispensing requirement or, the in-person visit at the outset would lead to mistakes in gestational aging, which could increase the need for a D&C or the amount of bleeding, et cetera. But that does not count, correct, as an adverse event?
So I want to be careful because there's a list of serious adverse events, and I'm not sure that I have all of them down to be able to recite them to you, although they're in the record. But I do think the premise of the question is wrong, this idea that the change to in-person dispensing would necessarily increase the risk of those events. That was not reflected in the data that FDA consulted, and I would point you to JA 383 to 384 in particular, okay, where FDA explained that even in person, you're not necessarily getting an ultrasound. That's never been required. And so the relevant question might be, is your provider going to ask you a series of screening questions, like when was your last menstrual period, in person or via telemedicine? And there's no evident reason why that difference would actually lead to different safety outcomes.
So there was not even I thought that there was a small percentage increase in the tracking. I'm wrong about that, which I may well be. You know the JA way better than I do.
Yeah, so I think that with respect to the ER visits, there was some evidence that there were increased ER visits, although as I explained to Justice Alito, that wasn't actually correlated with an increase in serious adverse events. I don't want to represent all of the different findings of the different studies because they varied a little bit, but FDA's ultimate conclusion was that Mifepristone could safely be dispensed without in-person visits. It had voluminous evidence, I think, to support that conclusion in 2021, and there's been no contrary evidence that's been introduced.
So there was no requirement of either an ultrasound or detecting a fetal heartbeat or anything like that, even before the doctor could just go based on the woman's recounting when her last menstrual period was.
That's right, and that dates all the way back to the initial approval of this drug in 2000. It has never been a required condition of use to have an ultrasound. FDA has always left that up to medical judgment. Now, it is of course necessary for providers to be able to diagnose ectopic pregnancy and to date gestational age. That remains true under the REMS now. Prescribers still have to have that capability, and they have to deploy whatever mechanisms they believe would accurately allow them to identify contraindications for use of Mifepristone. But it's wrong to suggest that if the court reverses 2021 changes, then every woman's going to get an ultrasound. That's never been the state of play in how this drug has been administered.
How, even under the pre-2021 REMS, was it possible to detect an ectopic pregnancy without an ultrasound unless the woman was presenting with pain?
So there's a set of screening questions that are often deployed. You can ask things like, do you have unilateral pelvic pain? Did you become pregnant while you had an IUD in or after a tubal ligation? Are you experiencing unusual bleeding? You could ask whether the woman has had a prior ectopic pregnancy. And if the woman has those kinds of risk factors, then imaging may be necessary. But that remains true under the 2021 REMS as well. The prescriber has to be confident that it has excluded those kinds of conditions before prescribing this drug. And the standard of care around the world, most medication abortion occurs without an ultrasound. Thanks.